Hi, friends. Instructor Catherine Korostoff here, and thanks for joining me for another conversation for Research Rockstars. Today, I'm very excited about our topic because we've done over 100 episodes in this series, and this is the first time we've actually talked about neuroscience. And I have a special guest who's an expert in the area who's going to be helping us with this conversation today. So with that, I want to introduce our special guest, Hunter Thurman. Hunter is the president of Alpha Diver, which is a firm based in Cincinnati that has done some very exciting work to help researchers get past superficial responses. This is something, Hunter, that I always feel so passionately about with our community, where I hear from our students and our clients all the time that it can be very challenging to get past superficial responses, whether you're doing qualitative or quantitative research. And obviously, for us as market research and insights professionals, that's what we want. We want to get past the superficial. And one of the things that's really impressive here that you'll note about Hunter's background is that he's applied his lessons from neuroscience to working with really key brands. So he's worked with Coca-Cola and Kimberly-Clark and McDonald's and some of these other really amazing companies. And clearly, these are organizations that are in highly competitive markets. They need to get past the superficial stuff. So with that, I do want to introduce Hunter. And Hunter, I do want to ask you, just as a little segue, might you have an example to share with us of a funny market research experience that you've had?
It seems like funny things happen with any study, but one that stands out. We used to do these longitudinal ethnographies, and people would be checking in and taking videos and things. And at one point, we were doing one about baby and child care with moms. And one of the moms actually had a baby during the course of this like 5-day study. And I mean, she practically live tweeted, she was like doing check-ins in the delivery room and like took a video of herself laying in the bed holding her newborn baby. And finally, my teammate was like, you don't have to keep doing this. Like, you literally are having a baby. So that always, we've had lots of interesting things happen, but that was one that always stands up. That was probably the most dedicated participant I've ever seen.
Yeah, definitely the dedicated participant award is needed here. That's a great example. And it's really consistent, frankly. I mean, I've never had that experience, but I'm always shocked at how candid people are in video.
Yeah.
Whether we're collecting that video like through a webcam IDI or through like a mobile ethnography app or an online diary app or something, and people are just really candid, but I've never had somebody be quite that candid.
That one was funny. Very memorable.
Before we jump into the topic, I do want to share with you something that's been an experience that I've had recently that I think might also be connected to this idea of getting past superficial responses. When you're working with these types of clients who clearly are big consumer brands and they need to get past the superficial, part of the benefit is getting past the superficial. But a related challenge, I think, is that I hear from our Research Rockstar clients and students that they're often in situations where the questionnaire that they're working on is just too long. There's just too many hypotheses about what might be the demand drivers or deterrents for a specific product category or for a specific brand. And what I always say is, you might not have to reinvent the wheel, right? There may be a model that exists so that you don't have to throw in 30 different hypotheses into your questionnaire. And I'm wondering if you have had that experience of, I know that your work in neuroscience is largely about getting past the superficial responses, but can it also help with the issue of, I need to write a great questionnaire, but it can't be too long?
Yeah, absolutely. As I think back, and as you say in the bio here, I started this company in 2011. I've been in this space for over 20 years. So that was kind of the midpoint at that time of my career. And the first half of my career, it reminded me of, and bear with me on this analogy, but it reminds me of like when you go on vacation and you're ready to go out to dinner. Like back then, before we had all these, phones and internet and all that, reviews and all this stuff, you just had to go out, and what I was prone to is walking around, the touristy areas, walking past 30 different restaurants, constantly having this indecision of, well, should I stop there? Is there a better place just around the corner? Have I seen everything? Do I know all my choices? Finally, by the time, you eat dinner, it's 9 o'clock, you sit down, you're kind of exhausted. You're like, geez, I hope I didn't just pick I hope I just didn't just pick the one because I ran out of time. Like it was always a very dissatisfying experience for me. Cut to now, there's Yelp. Now, when I go on vacation, I pull up my phone, I pull up Yelp, restaurants near me, and I can use criteria. I can look at it and look at reviews and look at, you know, what's closest to me. I know I've seen everything available and I've made a reasoned decision, and it actually lets me enjoy my dinner far more because I'm not wondering, you know, did I walk down every street? Did I miss something? Did I overlook a hidden gem? And that's a lot like research and a lot like study design. Because if you don't have Yelp, if you don't have a map or a framework or a guide, you have to wonder. And wandering in the form of a survey is let's try to ask every imaginable thing, every way we can think of it, and then surely we'll at least give ourselves the best shot of not missing something. Model-based research, which at the core is what neuroscience and behavioral science provides. Model-based research, the difference is instead in what's called model-free research, which is traditional research, it's model-free because you're going out and kind of gathering everything. Go and get all the data, bring it back, and then model it, then look for the signals. And so by putting, you know, 30 hypotheses in a screener or whatever, or in a survey or whatever, that's kind of what you're doing. You're sort of saying, let's go out and just collect everything we can imagine, and then we'll sort through it. Model-based, you're saying, look, today I'm going to talk about these 4 drivers of behavior. We know there are 4 things that drive behavior. Let's go out and map the marketplace back to these 4 drivers. I know I'm looking for these 4 things. There's really only, you know, it's probably not 4 questions exactly, but it simplifies. And it lets you make sure you didn't overlook something, even with all your hypothesizing and you know, thinking through it. You're sure you didn't overlook something. It's much more efficient. And you're able to get to the true deeper whys because you shed a lot of the biases, a lot of the assumptions, a lot of the conventions away. And that's essentially what we're doing. So exactly, it lets you know what you're looking for and much more effectively go and find it. That's a huge benefit of it, along with the fact that we're looking at these subconscious drivers that a respondent's not able to really tell us anyway.
I love that. So really, there's a couple of themes I'm hearing already. It is about getting past the superficial responses, especially on things where it's hard for people to self-report, right? Like we all love survey research, but we all also understand it's self-reporting. And so having a way to mitigate some of the risk that can come in with self-reporting, I love. But I also love the idea of, you know, referring this to a model-based design that not only does those things, but also can help you have a shorter questionnaire without feeling like it's going to be a big risk, you know, having the confidence to know that it's already been vetted for you, or that some of these constructs have already been vetted for you so that you will catch the things that are going to be important.
Exactly. We always say you're standing on the shoulders of that established model, and that's where you can be much more potent. And then, you know, don't forget, a shorter questionnaire isn't just, you know, for respondent fatigue and the things we think about. It's on the other end too. You know, when you're analyzing it, when you go out and collect all the data and it's back on your desk or your virtual desktop, it's equally overwhelming. So the model-based approach and these principles that we'll get to today is really empowering. You know, to know that you're standing on the shoulders of, you know, decades and decades of neuroscientific knowledge. You can be much more concentrated, much more potent in what you're going out and looking for.
That makes a ton of sense. And I do hear this from researchers all the time that, you know, sometimes when they are getting into designing, especially if it's going to be like a high visibility project, you know, one of these questionnaires that's going to be seen by the top executives at a big brand, you have to know that your questionnaire design is defensible, right? Because in the unlikely event that you come back with some results that are either hard to analyze, that's no good for you. But also if you come back with results that are in any way controversial or perhaps even challenging conventional thinking, you better be prepared to explain your methodology. And you weren't just winging it by throwing in every questionnaire, every question and every variable you could think of, but that you were coming to it from a place of rigor and based on previous research.
Absolutely. I cut my teeth on P&G business many years ago, and I remember one of the first lessons or first conventions or phenomena that I observed is when you went in, and the more senior the audience, the quicker this question came. It was always, well, what did you leave out? What'd you miss? What's not in here? And what a crippling question, because it's unanswerable. What did you leave out? Well, I wouldn't have left it out if I knew I was leaving it out. That stuck with me. And those first 10 years of my career that I described, where I felt like I was wandering around looking for a restaurant, that always stuck with me. With a model-based approach, you're able to say, well, nothing. I mean, look, nothing's, beyond reproach, nothing's perfect, but you can say, listen, we've used, as you said, a rigorous, scientifically backed approach, looking at these 4 dimensions, these 4 drivers of behavior. We interrogated all of them. And so we know we didn't miss one. We know we didn't leave something out. We didn't overlook something significant. And that's the benefit of a model-based approach. And that's highly defensible. It's not like, well, we thought really hard on this one and we really took our time on the questionnaire, so I really feel pretty good about it. I mean, those answers are apples and oranges, night and day.
Yeah. No, I really love that. And I imagine when you came up with ultimately a model that was focused on four factors, I imagine that there were many other factors that you considered, but that you were able to dismiss.
Yes, we have over the years, distilled this down. And I should say these 4 drivers, we've applied them in the enterprise world. We've taken them from the world of academia and applied them, in business, and run our, built this database, validated our own results, done, research on research and tested them. But the beauty of this, and from my perspective as somebody who's not, a neuroscientist by background, and as I've brought this to the world, that gives me a lot of comfort to know that we didn't make this up. We didn't have to think of this. We applied. We have a series on our LinkedIn that we call "Applied the Science." We've applied the science, and knowing that science is at your back is very very comforting, because you're not interjecting subjectivity or biases inadvertently. It's really about translating these forces, these known quantities from the world of neuroscience into an insight space.
Excellent. So then let me ask you if you could share maybe a couple of examples before we get to the 4 factors.
Yeah. So, what we often talk about, and by we, I mean my team of neuroscientists, my principal neuroscientist, his name is T. Siggy Hale, PhD. He did most of his academic work at UCLA, and then has joined us coming over into this world so many years ago, I guess, at this point, and bringing that knowledge. And one of the first things he observed when he sort of introduced to the market research space back then is it's a lot of getting what people think they think. And that intrigued me. And what he's describing is, when you look at the cognitive process, the way people make decisions, we only have access to our conscious brains. That's what we use to communicate and go about daily life. But there's a ton of decision making and emotion and things that people are familiar with, sort of colloquially, happening in the back of the house, happening between the ears. And so when you ask somebody, why do you do that, which ultimately is one of the key questions we're all looking to answer, what you're getting is their narrative of what they think they think. They're not lying. They're not being disingenuous intentionally in most cases, but they don't have access to a lot of the hard wiring. So they're explaining to you, whether in a video or in a survey or an open-ended response or whatever the medium, they're giving you what they think they think. And sometimes that can be accurate. So, going back into kind of the archives of my career, I remember there was a very clear phase. We were doing a lot of focus groups back then, where functional foods, nutrition became it was like the hot topic. And I remember there became this meme, this convention that we all would nod along with, of label readers. I don't know if you remember that or encountered that in your career, but it was the label readers, that consumers were telling us, like in food and bev, I go into the store, I pick up the package, I turn it over and I read the label. And I know that high fructose corn syrup is something I don't want. And I know this and I know that. I have a basis of knowledge, and I'm a label reader. And I remember for like like a 3-year phase. It was like the label readers, like that's what drives all behavior, label reading. And in some cases it was, but that was a purely rational decision-making lens. If everybody indeed in the supermarket was picking it up and reading the label, then everybody was behaving in a purely rational, practical way. A couple of years later, I remember we were doing another focus group, and we were talking about organic, in that case, with moms, using all these examples of research with moms. But we had these moms, we were saying, how do you decide what food to buy? Mostly like babies and toddlers, like little kids. And I remember there was this one respondent, she said, well, I buy all organic. And we had this legendary moderator. He was so good at peeling the onion. And, she said, well, I buy all organic. And we all kind of went, oh, label reader, like the label readers, like, yep, makes sense. But he really pushed on it. He said, well, why do you do that? What's the other option? She kind of went, well, conventionally grown food would be the other option. Well, what's wrong with that? Oh, well, what's the difference? He was very good, naive kind of interrogator. What's the difference? Oh, okay. Well, what would happen if you did feed your baby conventional food? And he really just kind of kept asking questions until finally this poor woman, she kind of shrugged. She went, look, man, my sister-in-law has done a ton of research on this. She feeds her kids organic. She tells me it's better. So that's why I do it. So what she revealed is it actually wasn't all the rational, practical label reading, and considerations or knowledge even that she had. It was a very tribal response. She had, and this happens in human behavior very often. We set up tribes. We benefit from collective knowledge. She had assessed that her sister-in-law knew what she was talking about and used that data. That was her valuable data that then actually was driving her behavior. But at first glance, she thought, well, I'm very informed and I buy organic baby food. So in that case, she even sort of realized in that discussion that why she was doing something was different than what she thought. It was much more social and tribal. Cut to a few years later, we were doing a project on actually a natural snack food brand. And natural snack foods was, continues to be a thing. But back then, just putting natural on the bag was like building a category. And this brand had been a real early player in the natural snacking space, but competition, the category was growing dramatically, and this brand was declining. And traditional research, they continued to ask, well, what do we need to do? What do we need to change? And everyone was telling them, you've got to have, expeller pressed sunflower oil, and you've got to have everything non-GMO, and you've got to have, basically what respondents had told them is, this thing's got to have about 90, this bag of chips has to have about $90 worth of ingredients in it in order to hit my high standards. Very rational. This is why I buy it. And we kept trying things, they were adding more and more, and it was still failing dramatically. It was like in danger of being delisted. So we pivoted the whole brand, the whole positioning away from the rational to the very experiential. We totally stopped talking about what it was and started focusing on how it feels. We went completely away from all the rational, all the what's in the bag, to this positioning around boldness and bold flavor and this very exciting, almost scary experience. The package went from really natural tan to black, this high drama, and we put a lot of emotional drama into it, all about the experience. That actually totally reversed the performance of the brand and took it from like negative 15% CAGR to plus, or not CAGR, growth, to plus 15%. It made all the difference and like put this brand back on the map. But if by following all the traditional, the rational, what people thought, they were following them out the window. And then the last example is one that thinking about, why people do what they do. If you've ever encountered a teenager, and certainly if you've ever done any research with a teenager, and you say, well, what kind of Skittles do you want? What do you want from Skittles? What would make you eat more Skittles? There's a lot of sort of, I don't know. I guess if they were on sale, I don't know. If you gave me a free sample, the things that you hear. What we discovered and applied in the confection space is that, look, people don't want sugar. People don't want candy. They want a thrill. They want an experience. They want something that basically drives their instinctual brain. And so one of the outcomes of that was something, dramatically different than you'd ever think of, in a flavor house or in a lab. But I don't know if you've seen zombie Skittles, which is these Skittles that every once in a while you get one that I think the package says that tastes like a rotten zombie. It's like a horrible, every once in a while you'll be in this bag of Skittles, one of them tastes horrible. Why was it successful? Why was that? You'd never, if you ask somebody, would you like a bag of Skittles that every fifth one of them is disgusting? It's like, of course not. The why is not something that a respondent could have rationally thought of or expressed or explained, but the insight was they don't want something that tastes good. They want something that's thrilling, and a little bit of fear, like a roller coaster ride in a bag. A little bit of fear is thrilling. That's this very instinctual, what they call, system one, the very subconscious brain. Sometimes our science team refers to as the cave brain. The oldest, most kind of root part of our brain loves that type of fear and instinctual excitement. That was the why. So those are stories. Those 4 stories are, sort of a historical tour that really demonstrate these 4 drivers of behavior.
I love all of your examples, and I have to say, even though I have not previously been familiar with your model, certainly as a person who's been doing market research for a long time, we all know that people tend to over rationalize their response, and it's really interesting to me. How can we get past this? And sometimes we'll say, well, if we're doing a product category, we're trying to research a consumer behavior where people are likely to give us over rationalized responses, that sometimes that can be an argument for doing qualitative research as opposed to doing quantitative research, so that we can, as your expert moderator did, peel the onion. But of course, sometimes you have to do a survey. Sometimes you need numeric, you have to have the quantitative data as well. So I think that it's really interesting that we can leverage a model like the one that you're about to share with us to really do that, and make sure that we're doing it in a thoughtful way.
That's exactly right.
So my understanding is that these are your 4 subconscious drivers that are represented in your model.
Exactly. Yep. So you think about those stories. Basically, when someone encounters a context, whether they're shopping for food and beverage, or they're deciding on life insurance products, I mean, it spans far and wide. Any context the person encounters, they'll use one of these 4 lenses, one of these 4 drivers to make their decisions. So you think back to the label readers example, that's the rational. That's, I want to acquire knowledge and information and make a very comparative, rational, practical choice. That does happen. And many people would skew into that for certain contexts, like, if you imagine doing your taxes, doing your tax return, it pushes everyone into that rational space. My parents they're retired now, but were both CPAs in their career. So doing their taxes didn't bother them. They were typically in a very rational space. It wasn't punitive. However, someone that's like an artist, my aunt who's a painter, I mean, it's so painful to have to switch gears and go into this very rational mindset and do your taxes. So, but sometimes the rational mindset is what drives us. The issue is that's what typically we humans always think we think. We always think we're making rational decisions. And even if someone did buy a car because they think it looks cool, it's really hard to do in a one-on-one interview or a survey or a focus group or whatever. It's hard to say, I bought it to stroke my ego. I mean, it's a lot easier to go, I bought it because it's electric and it gets great gas mileage and it's safe and it has, excellent customer service. We can convince ourselves of very rational narratives. So the rational is oftentimes where research can be, myopic. And that's where then when that senior leader goes, well, what'd you miss? You got to make sure you look at these other three drivers on the wheel. So the second one that I mentioned with the story about the mom and her sister-in-law, that's the tribal driver. That's tribal wisdom, tribal agreement. And what often gets misconstrued is that people will think, oh, that's kind of the lemming effect. I just do follow the crowd. And it's really not about that. It's about using those data, using tribal wisdom. If lots of moms have done lots of research and your tribe is an online group, for example, of moms on Instagram, you follow a group, that's data that you're using. It can shortcut a decision. I don't need to learn all about GMO and organic and labels. I can just do what moms like me trust and agree upon. That's the tribal driver. The experiential that I mentioned, which was all around not what it is, but how it feels. That's all about discovery, following your senses and discovering. That's how we learn about the world. So in the rational space, people can acquire information. In the experiential space, you're really acquiring and discovering experiences. And that's where then, as much as people thought they were buying these snacks because they had all these ingredients that were desirable, what was really driving their behavior was this discovery and this experience. And in that case, it was all about these bold flavors that nature can deliver. And then the last one, the instinctual, that was the zombie Skittles example. That's all about very impulsive, very much about see, get. It's our cave brains. I see that, I want it, I can have it. I don't want to deal with any consequences. I don't want to deal with other people. So the instinctual driver is very much about gaining advantages to things and gaining, really exciting emotional experiences that oftentimes are utterly irrational, just like that zombie Skittles example.
So let me ask you a question. Do you see a lot of variation when you apply this model? Do you see a lot of variation in how it applies to different product categories?
What's really interesting about it is that we see the 4 drivers present across contexts. So there was an example years back. We do a lot of things in packaged goods. I mean, that's where there's a lot of that's where a lot of our guidance ends up in food and bev, like McDonald's and things like that, and then packaged goods, things that you get at Walmart, in the grocery store. We did a project not long ago, however, in financial services, and found that the way people buy insurance products, or financial service products, of course, in research they had heard it's all rational. It's all rational. What we found is actually the other 3, less the experiential, but it was present. There was the tribal. Look, I've got a friend, or my brother knows all about this stuff, or there's someone in my office who read the whole pamphlet and learned it and compared it all. So what happens when our open enrollment happens? One of my teammates goes and compares all the plans, and he'll build his own spreadsheet, and he's like, this is the best one. Great. I just outsourced that decision. I actually wasn't rational at all. I was very tribal. I followed the wisdom of my tribe. And then the instinctual, we see that it was basically like a competitive advantage. Having really great insurance fortifies me and gives me this almost instinctual emotional protection and advantage that I don't have to worry about the world or fear threats from the world, because I'm super covered. So those other 3 things were really present in something, and actually explained the behavior and a behavioral problem that the company was dealing with one of their key audiences. It actually explained why their materials hadn't been working, why they were struggling. So these, likewise, even for things like fast food, you'd think it's all experiential, instinctual. The other 2 can be present as well. So to your point, there's always a surprise. It's always interesting, what's really going on between the ears. And they are present in pretty much any context. Even something like I gave the analogy of doing your taxes. Yeah, most people go really rational, but then you look at inventions like TurboTax, where it's almost like a gamified, how many kids do you have? And you click little pictures of people, you don't enter a number. They've made that experience much more experiential versus rational, and attracted a significant portion of taxpayers in doing so.
I really appreciate those examples, and the tax example too, as well, because I know, like you said, a lot of the work may be in food or in CPG, but I can tell you from doing, I spent a chunk of my early career doing a lot of B2B work, specifically with IT topics. So I was often doing research, qual or quant, with IT managers, security center managers, telecom executives, and all that kind of thing. And it was very much a big learning for me early in my career doing that kind of work, that they're, even in a B2B space, that there was a very big difference between what people said was the reason why they were making a certain selection or allocating a certain budget and what was really causing them to select a different company or supplier or to set a different budget. So even in B2B, things aren't always as rational as you think.
I've done a lot of B2B work as well and had the exact same experience. In fact, we've applied this framework there as well. And there's this assumption that when someone shifts into their job, they're purely rational, and even they always think that. And then you see that the behavior is to cite the book, predictably irrational. This is why. In spite of somebody saying, I'm going to make this decision, or we've done this with like IT managers, I'm going to make a decision based on this, then they do something different. This is why. And so, to your point on whatever methodology you're using, by taking these four, we do it in a very sophisticated, it's a survey instrument that has these very unique neuroscience activities that lets us measure all of these. But even if you're going into a focus group, or you're designing a survey, okay, what are the things I'm going to cover that are rational, and how can I incorporate these other three to at least make sure I have a look at it, at least make sure that we don't overlook it in whatever methodology, and that can be a huge difference across methodologies.
Excellent. And just to explain for some of our students and viewers who might be newer to research, my assumption, I guess it's my assumption, for each of these four things, I imagine these are constructs. That is, your model likely has a number of specific variables behind how it would measure rationality as a driver of behavior versus tribal, et cetera. This isn't just a set of four questions. Each of these four areas likely has a number of variables behind it.
It does. And if you were going to take today's discussion and apply it, you could kind of make it your own. I mean, a couple sort of pro tips, I guess, if kind of can use this, is do a forced choice. Like, say, in thinking about health insurance, what matters most, and have a prompt that's very rational and practical, one that's about, my teammates that I trust selected this policy. Do one that's experiential. I like the feeling. It was an easy, enjoyable process. Take these for what they're worth. I'm making them up as we go. And then the instinctual, it makes me feel like a boss, really, and make them rank those, because, everything's the most important. But what you'll find is sometimes something other than the rational will be like a close second, and sometimes it's not always. They may say, yes, it's the rational, but then the second place is what might surprise you. And sometimes that's where the insight lies. It's okay, yes, everybody comes to this with a somewhat rational, we've got to check those boxes. But when we look at that second place and what overwhelmingly came up, it was something very tribal. That's something that, can be super useful. So it also helps you just think, I gave those examples, just think of different angles of questions, different angles of prompts. That may not have occurred to our rational minds. As we researchers fall victim to it too, because we think we make our studies in a very rational way. We're using our conscious brain. This gives you these prompts to look and say, maybe there's some things we wouldn't have thought of.
Excellent. I love that. I think one of our, the things that really makes it for a great researcher is somebody who can challenge their own assumptions.
Right.
We have to understand that we as researchers are biased. It's very easy for us to inject our own cultural biases or, whatever we're bringing, to a project. We have our own biases, and we could unintentionally skew the results. I also love that you referenced the Dan Ariely book, Predictably Irrational. That's one of my favorite books. I always recommend that to people. Yeah. It's a real eye opener on consumer behavior. I think then just one last question before we wrap up, if you don't mind. As we're talking about these four drivers, I'm wondering, do you ever apply this in terms of market segmentation? Like, could you have a product category where really these four might combine in different ways to actually represent really different market segments?
Yeah, we do that quite a bit. We're doing it as we speak. What you find if you've done traditional segmentation, you end up with 5 segments. There's the rational segment that's like experts about whatever space you're studying. There's a tribal segment that's very social and socially driven. There's an experiential segment that's all about the bells and whistles and perfumes and things. You end up doing all your innovation against that segment. And then there's a fourth segment of they want to win. They want to be, the boss. They want to be in charge. Then there's a fifth segment that's like the cheapskates, like the price. I just buy on price. What we see over and over in the data is these four drivers are they are the way a market will segment. That fifth one we'll see in our data is a combination of all four that's at a socioeconomic level that they have to buy purely on price. And so what that says is rather than going out and fielding qual, to get to the questions, then a lengthy questionnaire, then 6 months in the data room and all the things that come with traditional segmentation, it's a short circuit. It's like, look, these are the four.
Right.
So yes, it absolutely can segment markets. And what's equally useful to that is once you understand someone's psychology, you can activate with them. You can reach them in much more focused ways, in much more effective ways. So this isn't just about, hey, look, there's these four people, these four mindsets that we discovered. It's really, in our practice, it's all about saying, and therefore we can zig where competitors zag by doing this, and this, and drive behavior. Because psychology is the underpinnings of all behavior, and that's what we're trying to harness.
I love that. That is fantastic. Now, I know this was just a quick look at the work that you've been doing. Can you tell me where people can go to get a copy of the book or other references so that they can follow along?
Yeah, the best place probably to connect with me and with our company page is LinkedIn. We publish a lot of data and a lot of opinion pieces, things like that. We're pretty active there. So just look, for my name on LinkedIn, and then there's a pretty rich blog and resource page on our website, which is alpha-diver.com, where people can, of course, subscribe to our newsletter and things like that, but they can also get into some of these webinars and podcasts where we share data, share lots of things from out in the field.
Excellent. And we'll be sure to post the links to those directly in the show notes as well. So Hunter, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I feel like I could talk to you for hours about this topic, but hopefully that was a good introduction for our student community so that they can get started thinking about how they can apply this kind of framework to getting beyond superficial responses in their own work.
I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you so much. And for those of you who've enjoyed the episode, please be sure to give us a like or subscribe. And this episode is available both on YouTube as a video podcast, as well as on audio only on Spotify, Audible, as well as Apple Podcasts. Thanks.